So there's a Daily Wire host by the name of Matt Walsh, and he does this segment here where he's talking about marriage. He's going to make a claim and make an argument that even surprises me. You shouldn't be surprised by much that comes out of a Daily Wire host's mouth, but this did it. Take a look.
Meanwhile, there are far too many choices. So the modern dating scene is what happens when every beggar becomes a chooser. Everyone is lonely and desperate for companionship, but the field is so flooded with options, there's such a surplus that you begin to feel like, kind of like I feel when I'm in the condiment aisle at Walmart trying to buy mustard. And there are 197 different types of mustard. And though all I want is just regular mustard, the overwhelming array of options paralyzes me. And I'm just standing there slack-jawed, questioning whether I should be settling for just regular mustard when I could be getting gourmet, Dijon, whole grain, honey French, yellow, spicy brown, white, yellow, German mustard instead. All of modern life is plagued by this problem. Everything is plentiful and can be obtained effortlessly and cheaply. But it's too plentiful and too effortless and too cheap. So you can turn on your TV and watch literally any movie that's ever been made, any TV show that's ever been produced. And yet how many nights have you wasted scrolling through the infinite catalog and then settling on reruns of, The Office because there's nothing else to watch? Well, there's plenty to watch. It's just that you can't settle on any one thing because your awareness that there are billions of other possibilities gives you anxiety. And it makes it so that you can never be sure that you're choosing the absolute best option, which means that often you don't choose anything at all. So dating is like this. Whereas before you had only the eligible single people in your town to choose from, now you have the entire internet. You're not confined by geographic boundaries or any other boundaries. The result, ironically, is paralysis. Now, on the complete opposite end of this spectrum are arranged marriages. Instead of a boundless, never-ending buffet of options, a young person in a culture that practices arranged marriages will be assigned just one, and they don't even make the choice. Their families just pair them up and say, here you go. There's far less freedom and far less autonomy in a system of that sort, but it is without a doubt superior to our system. We would be happier. Every person in the dating scene right now would be happier if they were just matched up with someone against their will, actually.
He says it's without a doubt superior to our system. Without a doubt. As if it's some sort of fact. So let's run through this. There's a bunch of responses to this. First of all, the question is, what do you value? Do you value marriage in and of itself? Is that the end goal, regardless of the nature of the marriage? And if it's brings you positive experiences or negative experiences or, a tumultuous time or long-term joy, is the end goal, marriage in and of itself, is a good thing? My guess is he would say yes, because of the argument that he's making. That's not what I would say. Because the value that I hold most close in this conversation is freedom. So I think freedom is a value that's above other considerations when it comes to something like marriage. And notice something. Republicans often say, that is the thing they value most is freedom. And they use it in the context of economics. They say, look, we believe in freedom. We believe in a free market. Any sort of government regulations or red tape, that's imposing on our freedom, and we value freedom more than anything else. Well, apparently you don't value freedom more than anything else. And by the way, even when they use it in a market context, it's incredibly misleading because it's freedom for who in a so-called free market? It's freedom for the business owner, for the capital class. It's really economic dictatorship for your workers, for your employees who have to listen to what you say, and they don't have much freedom in that respect, do they? But they claim, we value freedom. And they talk about it all the time in flowery speeches about liberty and America and freedom. They say they believe freedom of speech. Well, apparently freedom is not the thing he values most, particularly when it comes to this. Freedom is further down the list with things he values when it comes to relationships and when it comes to marriage. Well, I totally disagree with that. I personally value freedom more than any of the other stuff. Now, there's another issue that you run into. Look, in my experience, and maybe this is just me, you guys can tell me your experience, relationships need to be organic in order for them to be fruitful, meaningful, and have long-term stability. You can't go into something with a set idea in your head and then try to cling to that notion, because that sort of gets in the way of the natural flourishing of a relationship. Everything needs to be organic and needs to blossom on its own. It needs to be a process where you maybe start with just relatively benign intentions or no intentions whatsoever, and then a relationship develops, and then you, without even trying, you build a deep, dedicated bond. And it's been like that in my life with friendships, and it's been that way in my life with relationships. Is that it has to be organic in order for it to really be stable and secure in the long run. You can't just slap two people together and say, give it a shot. What? Another issue. If you have an arranged marriage, what if you aren't sexually attracted to the person who's supposed to be your significant other forever? That seems like it might be a slight issue. If part of being in a relationship is personal intimacy and sexuality, and you're not attracted to the person who you're with, how's that going to work out? Doesn't seem very stable in the long run. Now, you might have a totally loveless, sexless marriage, but that's not what I would want. Is that what you would want? Certainly not what I would want. Maybe Matt Walsh has different ideas about that. I don't know. And then to the point he made about mustards, like, man, it would be easier if there was just one mustard option. But having 100 mustards, even though it can definitely lead to paralysis of analysis, he's right about that. When it can be overwhelming when there's so many choices. But I would still rather have the choice of 100 mustards than having one. I still think that's preferable. And you know what your response to that should be? To have a little bit of discipline and have a little bit of confidence and certitude when you're picking the mustard. And you know what? Maybe over time you can try literally all 100 of them and find the absolute best one. If you're just given one mustard option. And Cody Johnson made a great point about this on Twitter. He was like, if we had one mustard option, then Matt Walsh, since he's right-wing, he would come out there and say, this is like communism. What, you only have one mustard option? That's nothing. This is what it would be like in Venezuela or Cuba or whatever. I don't like that. I want more choice. That's what he would say if there was actually only one mustard available. There's also not good data on whether or not arranged marriages are happier. Because divorces in countries that have arranged marriages, usually they're more heavily frowned upon, and these are even more conservative areas. And so you can't really, because there was one study that said arranged marriages are happier, but it's self-reported data. And how can you trust the self-reported data when you live in a culture and a society that so frowns upon divorce and things of that nature? It just seems like that's not really reliable data. It is true that in India, for example, the divorce rate is almost nothing. It's like 1%. But one of the reasons for that is they have, I think you need mutual agreement for a divorce. So like they both have to agree. So it's just a lot harder to get a divorce. And the culture and the society frowns upon it massively. Now, Matt Walsh might like that, but I just view that as what? Your freedom being restricted by external pressures. And so a lot of people are probably in really miserable marriages. I don't think like, oh, if it's arranged marriages, like 100% of the marriages are then happy. No. And we know the divorce rate here is what? 49%, 50% or something like that. That just shows me that's the nature of reality in relationships. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes you get into it for the wrong reasons. And about half of them are just not going to work out. And of the remaining marriages, what percentage of them are actually happy? 25%? So is it half of marriages that make it, are they happy? So that would be like 25% of them. Maybe that's the number. I don't know. But I don't think there's any good reliable data on, well, arranged marriages are definitely happier. Because there's one study that says it's about the same, and there's one that says arranged marriages are happier, but it's self-reported data, and because of all the external factors, I don't know if you could really take that at face value. And by the way, final point is, he doesn't even touch on the whole purpose of what marriage was supposed to be. Because, and this is according to an article in The Week that laid it out, quote, marriage's primary purpose was to bind women to men and thus guarantee that a man's children were truly his biological heirs. Through marriage, a woman became a man's property. So this, like, you need to understand the history of it to then understand how we got to where we are now. And perhaps a sort of arranged marriage type situation is a lot more political and economic than one might think. You know, it's certainly not about love. And I don't know about you guys, but again, I come back to my original point, which is I value freedom more than other stuff on this front. And if the marriage doesn't work out, hey, it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, that's great. And either way, I would like the wiggle room to be able to control my own destiny on this front. I don't want my parents or anybody else in society slapping me together with somebody and saying, Good luck. Matt Walsh has very, very different ideas about it, and that's obvious. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.